Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back in for OTRAM's second part of our knuckle rebuild video series. Today we're going to set the knuckle shims and the knuckle centering to make sure we don't prematurely wear out the oil seal. So we've got a little bit of prep work to do before we get into it. We've got the factory knuckle setting tool here, and we need to coat it with layout dye so we can actually see the mark. We'll go ahead and do that first. Just need to spray some on the middle to cover up our old marks from the last time we used this. Set that aside to dry. And I've already packed 3 of the 4 knuckle bearings, and I'm going to go ahead and pack the 4th. We've got our fancy Toyota factory knuckle grease. And you just want to put some of the grease in the palm of your hand and just work it in between all the rollers until you've got it good and packed in. Make sure you get it in everywhere. I like to work around from one side of the bearing, and then I'll flip the bearing over and work from the other side. And it's messy. I like doing it this way better than using one of the automatic bearing packers, just because you can see the bearings getting packed and make sure you get it in between all the rollers well. So we'll set that aside, and then we can actually move over to the truck and do the first set of measurements. Okay, now we're back over here to the axle. We can start setting up the knuckle centering tool. And the first piece we need is the scriber. And we'll stick that in here where the knuckle seal went and just push it all the way back. And then we'll take the centering rod and we'll put the lower bearing on there, slide it down. We'll pop the upper bearing in its race. I already hammered the new races in. And we'll just slide this up through the bottom and get everything nice and greasy. You can never have enough paper towels while doing knuckles. Okay, we'll get that set on there, finger tight. Get some of the grease off of it, so we're not tracking that all over the shop. And then we got to set preload drag on it, which should be 6.6 to 13.2 pounds. I'm going to snug these up a little bit before we check it. And kind of spin it around to get the knuckles and the bearings all seated. Let's see what that says. We've just got a regular old fish scale. And we'll hook it in the arm here. And that's only about 4 pounds of pull, so we've got a ways to go. Try that again. That's almost 6, so a little bit tighter. There we go, there's 7. You want to make sure when you're pulling at a 90-degree angle to the lever. So now we've got our preload set. We can go ahead and measure our distance A. We'll get our big calipers out. Make sure they're zeroed. And we can measure the distance between the two flats here. And I'm getting 6 inches, 6.586. We'll flip that around just to make sure. And yep, 6.586 again. So we'll write that down. And before we pull this whole setup apart, we need to use the scriber in here to scribe a line. So you can just take your fingers, pull the scriber out against this vertical rod, and then spin. And you can scribe a line into the blue marking compound we just put on there. There you go. I don't know if you can see where we've scribed a line on there. And now we can take everything apart and make our next measurement. Now we can come back to the bench and do some more measuring. So we need to measure the height of the steering knuckle from the bottom bearing cap surface to the top. So we'll get our big calipers out again. And we get 6.497. Flip that over and check this side just to compare. About the same. And maybe 6.495. We'll write that down as measurement B. And then we can start setting up to do the other check. So we're going to put the spindle lightly into here. And I left the bolts over in the parts washer. So put these in here. Down. And just give it a quick look to make sure that you're even and flush all the way around. And we can flip it over. We can take the scriber back out of the axle housing. We can take this spacer sleeve off and put it in the spindle bushing where the Burfield rides. And then, excuse me, we can put the measurement tool onto here. And it just goes in the bottom bearing hole. Make sure you put it on the same orientation you had it when you did the top, or when you did the spindle measurement, so that your scribe lines go in the right direction. I always like to put the nut on top, and that way I remember which way I put it. And we'll just snug that down. And we'll scribe another line in here by spinning the scriber against the rod. I don't know if you can see the second set of lines that it's done. And then we can take that apart and measure the distance on the rod. Now that we've got this rod back out, we can go ahead and measure the distance between our two scribe lines. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm getting 0.1355. And we'll check it in a couple of spots. And it looks like about 135. So we'll call that D. And then we get to start doing math. So to get our C value, we need to take our first two dimensions and we need to subtract B from A. So we'll fire up the calculator, and 6.586 minus 6.495 is 0.091. That'll give us C, our total shim thickness. And then, to get the lower shim thickness, we'll do E equals D minus 3 millimeters. So clear that. 0.1355 minus, and since we did this in English, we're actually going to subtract 0.12 inches, which gives us 0.0155 for E. Then the upper shim thickness is C minus E, which will then be 0.091 minus 0.0155, which gives us 0.0755 for our upper. And then we can compare that to what our old shims were. And see how we come out. Okay, so we've gone back through, done all the math, and now comes the fun part of deciding which stacks of shims to use to make up your shim pack. And you've only got 4 choices. And they never completely add up to the new numbers you've gotten. So, like our original top shim was a 0.047, and the new one's calling for a 0.0755, which seems a little odd, but when you're trying to measure the little bit of distance here, it gets hard to measure, and the math doesn't always work. So I always write down my original shims and see how close they are, and when you take the available shim thickness and you try to get it close to that 0.0755, you end up being able to make a shim pack that's actually pretty close to the original at 0.047. So sometimes you fudge it a little bit and in comparing it to your old shim packs. If you're doing like a disc brake conversion where you're taking drum knuckles off and putting disc brakes on, it gets a little bit trickier, but usually you'll get in the ballpark. But it's always fun second guessing yourself when you're going back and forth and your numbers don't match. So yeah, not super helpful at the end, but our new numbers, when you move the shim packs around enough to get them close to what the new numbers are and to keep the total shim pack thickness close to the same as the new numbers, you end up with pretty much the old numbers, which is a pretty good verifier that you did your measuring right. So yeah, any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'll link up a link to the knuckle instruction page in the link section below in the description. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll shoot the third video soon on reassembly.